I'm not sure where the myth of the perfect family came from, but it certainly was not from the Bible. The story of Joseph and his brothers is a doozy, isn't it? Jealousy, crazy dreams, murder plots, cover-ups, lies, blackmail, imprisonment, planting evidence, famine, grief, regrets, secrets, revenge. And yeah, there's some love and reconciliation and forgiveness thrown in there too. As Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw wittingly wrote, "If you cannot get rid of your family skeleton, you may as well make it dance." Well, dance away, Joseph, Reuben, Judah, Simeon, Benjamin, and Jacob. Dance away, because there are so many skeletons in this family, it's hard to know where to start. But isn't it that way with all of our families? Today we begin a 5-week sermon series on belovedness and what that means for our lives. What does it have to do with how we treat our family, our colleagues, our friends, ourselves, and our planet, all of creation? Usually, when we hear the word beloved, we think of romantic love. We think of poetry, "Oh, my beloved, I cannot live without you." And while the beloved does have a longing quality that we usually associate with romantic love, it is more deeply defined throughout the Old and New Testaments as a love that is based on respect and benevolent regard. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Our goal is to create a beloved community. And this will require a qualitative change in our souls, as well as a quantitative change in our lives." It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform oppressors into friends, he said. And it's not eros, a sort of aesthetic or romantic love. It's not philia, a sort of reciprocal love between friends. It is agape, which is understanding goodwill for all people. It's an overflowing love that seeks nothing in return. It's the love of God working in our lives. And this, he says, is the love that very well may be the salvation of civilization. Beloved is such an important word because it is a word of transformation. To see another as beloved, to see oneself as beloved, is to see as God sees, to forgive as God forgives, to love as God loves. It is to live as Christ lived. So this entire year, we'll be looking at the word beloved in different ways, and we start today with family. Every family has issues. Can I have a show of hands for any family that doesn't have issues? That's what I thought. Because every family has issues, none of us can use that as an excuse as to why it's impossible for us to love our families or to seek reconciliation within our families. Every family has issues, I believe, because all families have wounds of one kind or another. Whether that's a gaping wound from an overt violation, like abuse, or a wound from small resentments left unaddressed that over the years pile on and become like a scab over a wound that, really wasn't that bad to begin with, but because you kept picking at it and wouldn't let it heal, has developed permanent scar tissue. Sometimes the wounds in our families are about what life could have been, what we dreamed it would be before the diagnosis. We dreamed of a retirement that was carefree, and now we're a constant caregiver, watching our beloved transform before our eyes, and we're having to learn what it means to love all again. Other wounds in our families include children who feel like their parents push them too hard, or don't understand them, or who don't approve of their vocation or their marriage or their religion or lack thereof. We carry wounds of feeling like we never measured up to our siblings, or wounds of feeling like we always had to be the responsible one. We carry wounds of anger and bitterness for being burnt by a family member one too many times. We carry wounds that we couldn't bear children, or because we have a child that was born with physical or mental challenges that seem insurmountable at times. We carry wounds that we do not know our birth parents or why we are adopted. We carry wounds that we do know who our parents are, and we're ashamed of their behavior. And we live quietly in fear of their anger or violence. Maybe we carry wounds that we are alone. And we've had to work hard to create a family around us when it seems to come easy to everybody else. We carry wounds because our parents have died, our son has died, our daughter has died, our spouse has died. We carry wounds because we always wanted to get married, but we're single. Wounds because we are divorced, or because our parents divorced, or because our child is divorcing. We carry wounds because our family members do not go to church, or because they go to a church that tells them who we are is an abomination in God's eyes. We carry wounds that people who share our blood and genes and upbringing can somehow not share our politics. And it seems that we can't talk about anything meaningful anymore. We carry wounds because our teenagers are shutting down or acting out or talking back to us, or because our toddlers are throwing tantrums, and we wonder if other parents feel like we do, which is a lot of times like a failure. We even carry wounds in our DNA: depression, anxiety, alcoholism, genetic disorders. All of us are wounded in some way, which means all of our families are wounded too. And I think what makes this hard is that we think that our families are supposed to be tight-knit and share everything with each other. We all have these expectations about our families that we really don't hold to other people. Because, family is family. They are there for you when nobody else is, except when they're not there for you, or when you're not there for them. Take a moment now and forgive yourself and cut yourself and your family some slack. You're probably doing the best you can, and they are too. You see, families can also provide the greatest blessings of our lives, can't they? They are there when we are born, for many of us, and if we're lucky, when we die. They cheer for us even when we don't deserve a cheerleader. They support us financially when no one else believes in us. They care for us when we are ill in ways that redefine sacrificial love. They make us smile and laugh, and our families help us see our own quirks reflected back at us in ways that make our weirdness seem okay. Our families love us even when we move from Texas to Colorado and become Broncos fans instead of Cowboy fans. I know my mom and dad are listening. We travel the world with our families, and we take trips down memory lane with them. We are so tied to our families that we really don't know what we'd be without them. They form us and inform us our whole lives long. This is why, when we think about what it means to be in beloved relationships with others, that we start with the family. Because, we don't get to choose them, right? At least when we're children, we don't get to choose our families. And even as adults, there are parts of our families that are forever out of our control. And the fact is, to be in beloved community requires that we be in close-knit quarters, right? And sometimes uncomfortably close. And that's a built-in part of family life. So we kind of have a head start. I mean, anyone share a bathroom with 4 or 5 people growing up? Anyone the kid that was always stuck in the back middle seats between 2 or 3 other siblings? Now, a part of us will always be grateful for the family from which we came. And yet a part of us will always be longing for the family we never had. At the same time that we love our families and can't imagine life without them, we fight more with them, and we take our family members more for granted than anybody else, don't we? And why is that? This was certainly true for Joseph's life. Joseph, while seen as one of the heroes of the Old Testament in his Technicolor dreamcoat, one of the great fathers of our faith, Joseph, who we think of as the victim of his brother's hatred and the savior of the great famine, Joseph, ladies and gentlemen, has a storied past, and he does not have a squeaky clean reputation. Joseph may have been mistreated by his brothers, but he certainly did the same to them over and over and over again. What I find relatable about this story is not the actual events that took place, thanks be to God. I've never been thrown in a pit or sold, but it's rather the internal conflict that Joseph and his brothers felt and wrestled with along the way. That's what makes this story so human. Otherwise, it would be humorous or harrowing. The heart of this story is about sibling rivalry, but its root is jealousy. Whether or not you have siblings, I would find it hard to believe if you never experienced jealousy in a family relationship before, or if you never said something you probably should have just kept to yourself, or if you never had second thoughts about something you did, or if you never cried in secret over something someone said to you, or if you never wanted to get revenge on a family member, even if you never did it, or if you never looked at a sibling or a cousin and thought yourself or your life better than theirs, or this. I would find it hard to believe if none of us ever imprisoned a family member for something they have done or said, defining them forever by one moment and locking them in that identity until they prove themselves otherwise. There are so many subtleties in this story that speak to the struggle of being family. But there are so many moments that speak to the blessings of being family too. Moments of protection and provision, forgiveness and reconciliation, hospitality and sacrifice. Even moments of deep grief that are born out of deep love. And in all of these moments, the messy ones and the miraculous ones, we learn that if we could see our family members as beloved, with all their faults and frailties, then we can love them with a love that helps us love ourselves too. Think of the beautiful moment of Joseph and Benjamin weeping upon one another. Now, throughout this 13-chapter saga, which Phil summarized so eloquently for us, Joseph's brothers have some sinister moments, some shining moments, and some sacrificial ones too. The sinister ones come early in the story when they're jealous of Joseph's favored status with their dad, and when they're peeved with his dreams about them bowing down to him. And really, who can blame them? Their low point comes early on when they plot to kill Joseph. But did you notice 2 brothers speak up? First, Reuben, who says, let's not kill him, let's just throw him in the pit. Okay, I'm not exactly sure if that's better, but I think he's trying. And then Judah comes up with a different plan, maybe slightly more compassionate, I don't know. Let's not kill him, let's just sell him. Granted, this saves Joseph's life, but being owned by another is no way to live, But it's when the brothers put goat's blood on Joseph's coat and take it to their father and lie to him, letting him think that his beloved son is dead, that the brothers are really at their cruelest. Doing something bad is one thing. Lying about it is another. But intentionally causing someone the deepest of griefs, that's really flat out wrong and tragic. I wonder, when have we lied to someone we love to protect ourselves, but not really thinking about how it would make them feel or affect their lives? Because when we act out of jealousy or fear, we really become blind to the pain of others, don't we? And even a small lie creates a rift in a relationship, because relationships are built on truth-telling. In your own family life, I wonder today if you need to share a truth that might be hard to hear for some, or maybe even just correct a story that didn't contain the whole truth. There are other lessons for us in this text. I mean, once we meet Joseph's brothers again in Egypt, they seem to all of a sudden be the nice guys, right? They have come full circle. Granted, they don't know who Joseph is, but they are certainly caring for one another more. I mean, Reuben offers his own sons to his father if Benjamin is harmed. And when the silver cup is found in Benjamin's pack, Judah was the one willing to be enslaved in place of his little brother. And you get the sense that they are haunted by guilt, don't you, about what they did to Joseph. Guilt and regret are certainly two obstacles to our belovedness, not forgiving ourselves, which we see in this story. But the fact that the brothers eventually talk to Joseph, once they find out who he is, and they realize all the ways that he's been toying with them over the years, that shows immense love and forgiveness and a desire to have a relationship again. And Joseph, while making the most of a horrible situation, he has his fair share of issues. He really is quite obsessed with making his brothers pay for it, it seems, for many years. And yet, through it all, we see Joseph running off and crying at different points, realizing, I think, that the love he has for his brothers is real, and yet he doesn't know quite how to express it, how to reveal himself to them, or who he had become. Sometimes in our lives, it is easier to continue a lie than it is to face the truth. For Joseph, I don't think he even knew where to start, did he? He had an intentional struggle with his brothers over the span of a lifetime. And I have to tell you that it has hit me hard this week that the reconciliation that happens here actually happens at a time of natural disaster. It takes a famine for Joseph's brothers to come to Egypt and for them to reconcile. Their physical hunger is what led them to discover the hunger they had for a healed relationship. And I found myself asking, if there had been no famine, would Joseph and his family have ever been reconciled? Would his brothers have ever gone to Egypt? Would they have ever known he was alive? I've been thinking about this a lot this week in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey and the earthquake in Mexico, and in the wake of Hurricane Irma and Jose and the fires in the Northeast. We see so much devastation and heartbreak in these natural disasters. But it's amazing to see families coming together, isn't it? Families helping one another, strangers helping strangers. But do we have to wait for a natural disaster or any kind of tragedy in our lives for us to realize that the relationships around us are precious, to not take our families for granted? Families pull together in times of tragedy. No one thinks of a grudge or resentment when your life is at stake. No one replays an argument or fights over who has what when your very lives and livelihood are at stake. And all of those petty arguments and not so petty arguments go away when you realize that you could lose the very people you love the most. Everything that's trivial fades away, and everything that matters binds you together. So today I leave us with this question of family. Because I think there's probably a family member in your life that you argue with, someone who you don't agree with, someone who you struggle to understand, someone who has hurt you or harmed you in some way or just annoyed you, someone who you never pick up the phone for, you just let their calls go to voicemail. Who are you taking for granted, assuming they'll always be there for you? Is that fight, that disagreement, really that important? Or could we say, I'm sorry? Could we work on amends and healing? Because there may not be a hurricane or an earthquake or a fire or a famine to bring our families together. Lord, I hope there's not. But we can start doing it on our own. Mother Teresa answered the question, what can you do to promote world peace? By saying, go home and love your family. Amen.